Can we stop asking for bans for like 2 minutes? Hey everybody, it's here, and today I just want to give a quick discussion video based around the format, everyone asking for bans. You know, we do have a ban list coming up, so it's natural that people want to have the ban list discussions, but it feels like since the previous ban list, people feel like, okay, we're becoming this kind of game that we're just going to fix everything with ban lists, and I have a couple of opinions on that. But of course, guys, before we get started, if you want to pick up any DBS singles or sealed product, I have to point you guys over to 3 Mana Inc., the best place in Canada to pick up your DBS sealed and single product. And if you guys want to watch me stream games, have discussions like these, if you guys disagree with my opinions and you guys want my live conversation on it, then link to my Twitch is down in the description below. Stream most days of the week, depending if there's something going on. But with that, let's jump into the topic at hand. Now, the current situation is that everyone's asking for bans for very specific things and then lots of things. As soon as the ban list got popped off, instantly people jumped on and said blue need to be banned. You need to ban the Bojack engine. You need to ban the baby. You need to, and to be honest, with the new blue cards coming out, I could almost see an argument for some of them. Blue is getting pretty busted. And now with, you know, the format settling now, we're seeing discussions for bans on blue yellow because people think that blue yellow is tier 0. I will say it's very generically good and there is a precedence for blue yellow getting hit, but then there's also additional bans asking for A17 and like, here's the thing. Generally, I think people are freaking out a little bit too much. I think personally, I want to make sure that the game fixes itself, which means, yeah, okay, there were a couple of tournaments where blue yellow did extremely well and blue yellow is still extremely good, but I believe in giving the player base time to adapt, make them figure it out if they can beat it, make them fix it, especially if we have a new set coming. I don't understand nuking a format as a new set comes out, because a new set inherently is supposed to come with new tools that are able to allow us to combat the previous threats that were present in the previous meta. Now, of course, with a powered down set, which Cross Spirit ended up kind of being, we didn't really end up getting those tools and we needed the ban list because for what it's worth, for a number of sets, those decks weren't being touched. But ever since the E-ban list, it feels like, okay, every ban list needs to be a nuke ban list. And we're not Yu-Gi-Oh! The game doesn't need it. It doesn't need to follow that philosophy because it didn't need to up until very recently. And the game has been doing just fine. I think we are in a place where if people would fix their decks to a point where they can adapt and change, then we can move forward. And I think this is kind of something that's been perpetuated by best of ones for the most part. Because we've been living in best of one land for like 2 years now, which, you know, no, not trying to throw shade anywhere. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. A lot of people feel like they can take whatever deck to whatever tournament, and you know, your boy has done it a number of times and probably still do well, or just not have to change anything about their deck because, you know, based on the matchups you end up seeing, maybe you end up doing well anyways. I think it has really shifted people's perspectives into how to compete against in a meta. And you know, I think a lot of people are just not respecting the best decks out there, or just figure they're not going to see it, or just it's best of one and it doesn't even matter. Best of one really perpetuates a lot of bad feelings about the game in terms of, one, people are just going to take whatever because it is what it is, and people don't feel the need to adapt because if they don't see the matchup, then they adapted for no reason. So it just perpetuates this feeling that people feel like they can't beat the best decks, but they don't want to modify their decks, but you're actually not really rewarded for modifying your decks for the meta if you don't see those matchups, because best of ones is so punishing if you're not the most consistent version of your deck. And I think at this point we just kind of need to accept that best of one is its own format. I was really against it when the Reboot Gohan got banned out of the best of one format, and I was like, but if it's too good for best of one, it's probably too good for best of 3. And I will say I have evolved from that opinion now. I do believe that at this point in time, best of one's not going anywhere. They attempted best of 3 for webcams as far as regionals goes. They didn't like it. It didn't pan out, which, little disclaimer, yeah, a tournament's going to run late if you start it at 6 p.m. Eastern for a North American tournament. Like, they tried something new, and like, props to, you know, the TOs for trying that, but like, I don't know. PPG has done best of 3 online tournaments. They were very strict about the timers. They started early and like, I don't know, the event went fine, but nevertheless, it's something that they want to stray away from. Fine. So best of 1, I don't think is going anywhere. And at this point, I think because the game is designed with best of 3 in mind, it's okay to have really powerful things. You know, A17 is stupid monstrous, and in best of 1 he's absurd, especially since most decks can't afford to main deck the Jiren that, you know, counters him. But in best of 3, you just slot in 3 of them, and then you'll probably see them by the time turn 7 comes around, and you actually have an answer to what they do. So this is kind of an issue, and I do feel like if best of one is going to stay, which it feels like it's going to stay, and honestly guys, I think moving forward, even once IRLs become more of a thing, we're probably going to have a hybrid system where we're still going to have online tournaments mixed in with IRLs, and I think the online tournaments are still going to be best of ones, unless something changes about our game. So in that scenario, I think it is fair for us to just accept that this game now has two formats. It has the best of one format, and it has the best of three format. And I think to balance those two, we need to actually hone in and bring in a best of one ban list. They attempted it. I mean, it worked for what it's worth. In best of one events, you never saw Reboot Han. And at the time, I did say if it was too good for one, you might as well get rid of it in the other. But that was with the understanding that best of three was eventually going to come back. And in best of three, a lot of issues that you see in best of ones get mitigated. But I feel like best of one is just going to become a staple format of the game, and you just have to see it as two separate games. It is the same base game, but they play differently. The formats play differently. In best of ones, you're allowed, like, look at me, I played Red Yellow Baby at a regional, and like I won a few games. In best of three, that deck gets hard hosed, but in best of ones I was able to do it, and that's because the reality is that best of one plays like a different format. So what's busted in best of one isn't so much busted in best of three, because you're able to bring in answers and you're able to modify your decks to account for matchups. Cell Surge is an absurd best of one deck, but in best of three is very, very manageable. And that's kind of where things line up right now. And I think at the core, a lot of player frustrations are real. I think a lot of people are frustrated with a lot of cards. Some things are very pushed. And I think they're very legitimate in the eyes of best of one, but in best of three, not as much. Granted, Blue Yellow is still doing incredibly well in best of three, but I think there's some things you can do to mitigate. And like I said, I don't like, shaking up the format with ban lists before a set comes out, because it looks like the next set, Saint Showdown, is going to give us some tools that actually mitigate the blue yellow stuff. That King Vegeta Unison looks nuts. And it deals with Bojack, and like, yeah, you're not going to play him out a couple of turns. You're probably not going to play him out on turn 3 because they have Zamasu, but at the end of the day, you play him out on 5, and then you manage. If you're not attacking them, they're way worse. So you might as well just wait it out, get to turn 5, do your thing, and then you go from there. So I do think people need to cool off. People yelling about blue in general, I think, is a little overdone. I think blue is fantastic. Like, if blue mid-range is the best deck in the game, then I think we're fine, because that leaves openings for aggro to sneak in. It leaves openings for combo control to sneak in. If mid-range is your best deck, and I get some people hate the generalization of the game, I think it leaves a ton of room for archetype decks to do well, aggro decks to do well, control decks to do well, because it just gives the format as much breathing room as possible to be able to do things. And like, if you tech in good enough, I think you can do extremely well. So with that said, how much do I think is legit? If we are talking ban list, we'll slide in a mini ban list prediction here, but maybe we do its own video. I think A17, best of one ban. I think in best of one, like, it's just too busted. Fu Shrouded, arguably full ban. And like, here's the thing, guys, I'm a blue player. I love my blue cards, but like, I'm just being fair. The reality is Fu Shrouded has like 2 cards that can answer it. 3, maybe. Like, it is so incredibly good at what it does at shutting down your opponent. And the reality is other colors don't have tools to deal with it. It's only really blue. And while I do think a 6 energy card should be hugely impactful, there should also be forms of counterplay. And the problem is, with the way Fu Shrouded works by preventing auto activations, means that it's just not really counterplayable for most of the format. And I think a card like that does fall under the realm of being dealt with. As far as blue yellow goes, you can hit Bojack, you could limit him to 1, or you can hit Zamasu. And the thing with Zamasu, and I'll bring it back to actually Zamasu for a bit, a lot of people dislike Zamasu because it slows down the game. It prevents people from being able to play the way that they were playing before. But I harken back Zamasu to basically be, Zamasu for Unisons is basically our first counterplays when they got introduced to the game. So Vegeta the Cruels and all like that. And people, were very frustrated because it felt like you couldn't play cards that cost 4 or less for a while. But then they introduced deflect cards. And here's the thing, guys. It is normal for future sets to introduce tools that allow you to combat the older stuff. The problem with Zamasu, I will say that Zamasu feels a little pushed, Zamasu does something good all the time, and he's never actually bad. Like, he's never a bad card in your hand. He draws you a card at worst so he can't trips. He prevents cards from coming into play, including Unisons. And if it's a boss monster that's bigger than 4 and doesn't have barrier, you can still rest mode it. So like the card's absolutely bust. It does a million things for 2 energy. It's absolutely absurd. So while I do think Zamasu just shows us a trend that like, hey, we're moving towards finally giving you guys tools to deal with unisons, because here's the thing, guys, we haven't had tools to deal with unisons, but that makes sense, right? In a set where you're trying to highlight unisons, you're not going to give players tools to just wreck unisons right out of the gate. You want players to be able to experiment, to have fun, and to feel the power of a mechanic before the game introduces tools to deal with them. All TCGs do it, MTG does it, Yu-Gi-Oh does it, they all do it. So it's normal. It just does feel like Zamasu's been a little bit above the curve. And Zamasu's probably my favorite card right now. So me saying like, it just does feel like it's above the curve. Now, here's the thing. It does show that Zamasu being printed means that eventually we're going to get things like unisons with deflect, more archetypes that play around that kind of thing. And other colors should be getting removal that matches the level Zamasu does. Or maybe Zamasu was just incredibly pushed and, you know, it is what it is. But either way, while I do think Zamasu is incredibly good, I do think it shows a trend that the game is moving towards being able to now answer unisons more adequately. And, you know, this is a trend with all card games. So whether they decide to say, you know what, it's probably fine, or they decide to say, we overtuned it a little bit at the moment for where we see us scaling answers in this card game, well then fair. And like as much as it sucks, I totally understand it, so I wouldn't hark it that way. But either way, that or the Bojack. As far as the Bojack Blue Engine goes, I think that's fine. Like, you're paying 2 energy or 3 energy if you're hard comboing it to be able to play removal that's like a dual attacker after the combo step. So just like, I think it's fine. Naturally, like, I'm a blue player, so obviously I'm going to think things are fine. But generally, I think for those things, everything's okay. The biggest thing takeaway I think is really best of 1 is its own format. It plays differently. You have to build your decks in a different way, and it's way more RNG reliant. And on that front, I think cards like A17 that really force the meta into this weird box where like you just get punished for trying to be a smart deck builder because maybe you don't even end up facing a blue deck in a tournament, definitely means that cards like those that completely skew a matchup in one way or another probably need to be dealt with. And at this point, if best of 1 is going to exist long term, it needs to be its own format. I think that's just the reality of the game, and I think for the sake of the health of the game moving forward, it would probably help. That said, I don't think we need a huge ban list. We're going to get a new set. It's going to bring in new tools, and maybe it'll change the way that decks play out and how the meta shapes. And I'd rather see release of cards change how we play versus just hard banning things and shaping a meta based on how we want to see things. I don't know. That's just my take. That's the general overview of the format. I think generally the format's fine. If they don't touch anything on the ban list, so be it. I think the best way to move forward is that if best of 1 is going to be a reality for the long term, then we need a best of 1 ban list. And as far as the current meta, I think we're going to get new tools to be able to deal with it. And I think this next set, while the archetypes themselves aren't incredible, I will say the individual SRs will definitely give some power boost to a certain decks that can maybe shake things around. With that said, guys, those are just my opinions. I would love to hear your takes down. You know, what do you guys think should be banned? Should anything be banned? Do you guys think the format? I think a lot of people really like the format, but you know, people like to complain. So I would definitely love to hear your takes down in the comments below, guys. If you liked the video, hey, give it a thumbs up. If you thought my opinions were shit, or even, I mean, you could think they're shit and still like the video for what it's worth. But if you thought they were shit and they were presented like shit, you can give it a thumbs down. If you guys want to watch more videos, we're doing discussion stuff. Of course, we are going to do coverage of the next set very soon. Then subscribe button's in the corner. With that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.